In Mike Husar's sort of absence, I'm going to bring the meeting to call to order today for the February 4th downtown bid board meeting. I believe we have a quorum here, so we're going to go right to our agenda for the day. The first would be approval of our prior January 7th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second. All right, any other questions? So that is passed. So we're going to go on to the next agenda, which is our financial report. Adam, can you help us with that?
Absolutely. All right, you have two financial reports in front of you. One of them is your 2019 and then your 2020. With your 2020, you have your $107,259 in your budget. Actual is $1,354.55. Total encumbrances to date are $8,750, and then available is the $97,154. I will point out on your 2019, you have your undesignated fund balance at $118,242, and that is not reflected in 2020 because finance needs to carry that over to the 2020 account.
Any questions or discussion? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that's approved. So back to our agenda. The next one is for the dog station discussion and decision. I think, Adam, you have some input there.
I do. The downtown continues to become more and more dog friendly, and the bid had discussed participating in that effort. And with that, you had discussed potentially purchasing or contributing in some way to dog waste stations. So on your screen, well, on the screens around us, you'll see the single bag dispensers ranging anywhere between $60 and $100. At the last meeting, you guys discussed not wanting to go towards the garbage cans so much because that kind of creates a mess. There are a couple of different versions of this, and I would, and we would get in touch with Parks so that it doesn't fly in the face of anything that they were doing. Ultimately, it's their decision. And then here it is on a stand that ends up getting a little more expensive at $130. And this is the large waste station that you guys weren't a big fan of at $230. In these books, the product books that municipalities use, these things go as high as $350, $450.
And that's for a bag holder goes as high as $350, or are you talking about the entire
The entire system you're seeing on the screen,
okay,
right?
with the trash can and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Okay.
How many do we think we need for the downtown area?
I can't imagine more than 2 or 3, if it's more of a Riverwalk thing.
Is that what's planned for the Riverwalk, 2 or 3?
There's no plans for the Riverwalk.
Okay.
This is more of an initiative by the bid to go to the Parks Department and say we'd like to help contribute towards the dog-friendly initiative.
Just on the Riverwalk, not anywhere else downtown. So
There's
far.
nothing stopping from anywhere else downtown too, if you think that would be helpful.
I mean, if we were to do something like this, I think a reasonable number would be a dozen scattered throughout the bid. Some down on the Riverwalk, some in downtown. I think the original thought was to try and find something that sort of meshed well with the trash cans and the benches that we have, so sort of maintain a aesthetic sort of similarity. And I think $100 a shop is reasonable, and I'd be up for purchasing up to 12 of them.
Can I ask where the installation would come from? Is that city?
Yep, we would point to Doug most likely. He's out here. Yep.
Doug, do you have any thoughts on a dozen? How would that mesh with trash cans placed elsewhere?
I guess we'd have to talk with the Parks Department. I know Mike is here as well, as how many they feel are needed along the Riverwalk. Maybe if you purchase some with the intention of installing them on the west side as well, when that is complete, so they all match. Sometimes products go away after a while, but it's something we can work out here amongst city staff to find locations and take recommendations from the bid as well, or business owners downtown.
Who then also is responsible for refilling the bags? Is that what, whose expense is that?
Put me on the spot here. I would imagine that would come from the bid. I don't know what they hold for bags, does it say?
It does. You've got anywhere between 400 and 600 bags. I don't have a test group to see how many we would use in the first year and what we should budget for, but I can't imagine it's a lot.
So Brian, just a question for you, since you think 12 is a good number, would that put some in reserve for the west side? Or are you envisioning more than when that gets done?
I would envision a few more when that gets done. But if we decide to, set 3 or 4 aside, then so be it.
I'm not sure, where do these get mounted? Do they get mounted to the trash cans, or I'm not too familiar?
They can really get mounted anywhere. Some of them even have it on a tree. I think, this one has it on a tree. It can go up anywhere.
Does anyone know if there was volume pricing? If we go to a dozen or something like that?
It
That
does.
include shipping? What was our all-in per unit?
The smaller ones don't do it as much as the larger ones, but as you can see here, the pole version of it goes down with every 5. You get $3 off each one. So we'll once we figure out which ones exactly fit, we'll find the volume pricing for that.
Just out of respect for the technology here, Mike, do you have any input on it as a dog owner?
The question that I have do we have an idea of the cost for the refill? Do they say that any place in the catalog?
I don't have that in front of me, but that won't be, I can find that. Let's just block Mike's face while I do it.
Doug, if I can ask you just to buy some time, have you seen a issue with pet waste?
And then that was my other question. Is there a problem if we don't put receptacles and people put the waste in the garbage cans? Is there an issue with that?
That would be our preference, that they go in the trash cans that are existing down there.
Okay.
So do you have an idea how many trash cans are down there? Surely you have that at the tip of your fingers.
Oh, yeah. Put me on the spot today. No, I don't know that offhand.
Okay.
I guess my thought to Adam would be is that you do the part, along Main Street, there's not too many places where they would be used, but I could see in Settlers Park, Vest Park, Veterans Park, and then maybe a couple along the east side of the river, and then depending upon what happens on the west side, how many areas there would be that could actually be used by the dogs. It's kind of going to determine it. To put it in front of my store would be kind of a waste, because there's not going to be any place for the dog to go. So when we talk about numbers, I think it's kind of limited to where they can actually go.
So a quick Google says 2,000 bags at $63.
And they hold 600 bags.
10 rolls of 200.
That's a lot of crap. I don't think this is a really big expense, you guys. I think, we can provide doggy poop bags for the downtown. I think we're okay.
Yeah, and as an aside, I can imagine
I
that.
agree, Peggy. I was just trying to figure out, as if we said, okay, let's put $2,000 at it for this year, will that will that cover us for the year with the receptacles and the bags?
Sounds like there was 400 to 600 initially and loaded in these things. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So we're probably talking under $2,000, based on, I don't know if shipping was included in that price. It looked like my eyes can't quite get there. 130 roughly, or 120 per unit.
No, I'm not sure on shipping yet.
Okay.
And, I guess I would just want to make sure before the purchase that they match everything and they're going to work. So I know at this point we're just talking about conceptually, a half a dozen different ones. So would it make sense to, over the course of the next few weeks, nail down one and present it to the board at the next meeting with all-in cost and quantity and make a decision at that point?
I don't disagree with that.
Yep. I mean, the only question I would have is, what do you do as far as like when the receptacle is empty? Do we put like, please call this number if this is empty, so that somebody knows to go refill it, rather than having a city person have to constantly check that kind of stuff?
Well, if it was near a trash can, they would kind of eyeball it. So it would
Yeah,
kind of
that's
be in
true.
the port. That's what I was asking about the trash
Yeah,
can location,
okay.
because that's where they want to dump, so
Right,
it kind of
and
makes
then they
sense
can
to
check
put it
it.
near there.
Okay.
I just feel like, it's not a big expense. I'd like to table this till next meeting with a little bit more research. There's no question we need to do it. We should have the right head count and see the design, so I think that's a great idea. Can we just add that to next meeting agenda? Okay. So let's move forward with the third item on our agenda today, which is the downtown parking ordinance recommendation. And Adam, I think you want to tee that up for us too?
Absolutely. All right. So the members of the bid received a flyer with a public input session. There's a proposed parking ordinance amendment that went to council last month, and then they had asked to come to the bid and get the bid's recommendation to council. And with that, I will turn it over to the Chief Moilers here, and would like to say a few words on this.
I don't know. It's working. I don't know how many of the proposals you want me to address, but a little bit of, not that we need a history of the parking problems or discussions, but the customer-only parking was put into place, I think it's almost 18 years ago now. We've had varying levels of success, not success, enforcement, not enforcement, and our last discussion when I was here, I said if it's going to work, it's got to be a voluntary type, and I said from an enforcement standpoint, probably the easiest is either to put meters in or put 2-hour zones or time zones in. And it came back to me pretty clearly that the downtown businesses did not want either of those. The other thing that has happened over the course of years is we have received individual businesses saying, I want this in front of my business or whatever, and I'll just go handicap parking stalls, for instance. And so they've gone in on the public street throughout downtown, and I don't even think people realize how many there are, but recently received another request of somebody saying they wanted 2 handicap stalls on the street near their business. And what happens, at least in my experience, is every time we put one in, it's for a business-specific reason, and then that business leaves, and that spot is not used. We have, in fact, they kind of informally, but we had our staff and myself looking at those over a week period of time, and one of those spots was used. So every time you put something in like that, it means you're taking away parking from other people. I had a similar request for a loading zone, and again, unless, and a loading zone, by the way, is probably one of the most misunderstood by a lot of businesses. They think that means they can just park their own business cars there as they please. A loading zone, even though it's in front of your business, you still have to be actively loading and unloading. The fact that there are a number of alleys downtown that allow for deliveries is one of the reasons why I would say I'm not in favor of a loading zone, because again, it takes up parking. But that's, if you want to have those, The other thing I see is the UPS, the FedEx trucks, as you know, they're not going to park a block away at a loading zone and then haul their stuff a block away. They're pretty efficient at getting in and out. So I expressed those concerns to Adam when he brought those to me. Another business went, and that I think is the proposal that was discussed at the January meeting he's referring to, wanting to make, in my mind, a business-specific request to put in a time zone by their business. And just so some people may say, well, why is this going to the various committees? And I just give a little backlog or a little back history. For many years, there was a parking authority in the city of West Bend that regulated the parking in all of the public lots downtown. In 2010, I believe I have the right date, the parking authority was disbanded, and basically so what they did at that time is the permanent lots, or the permanent spots in the lots, was to be regulated by the clerk's office. Stephanie, that's your understanding also. And any other regulations, because they have to go into the city's traffic manual, go to the Safety Commission. The reason they have to go into the traffic manual is that's what gives us the legal authority to enforce those. So when that proposal was brought to my attention, I recommended that it first go to the Safety Commission. And I'll take a little bit of a fault for this due to some number of issues we had. We didn't have a Safety Commission meeting for a while. When it came time to schedule that, that's when these other requests came up. I spoke to Mike Huzar, and it was my recommendation that all of this parking get looked at by the bid. And again, just for a little background, when we have other Safety Commission items, we generally notify all the neighbors, leaflet them, encourage them to call or come to the meeting. Because this affected such a broad range, and mostly the businesses downtown, it was my recommendation that we simply, I shouldn't say simply, but that we take it to the bid, discuss it, and ask the bid for their endorsement one way or the other. And so that is why this is here today, is asking for the bid to come to some agreement as to what you would like to do on these parking changes. And again, it's my belief that if an individual business wants to propose a change, obviously it's the city's ordinance and it's the city's enforcement of that, but I think there should be some input from the bid and the overall business district, and not just taking all these individual business requests.
Well, I'm pleased to see we've got at least 20-plus people here. Is probably the best turnout we've seen in one of our meetings ever, at least since I've been on the board.
Parking seems to do that in the
Seems to
city.
do that,
Yeah.
sir. So I appreciate your input. Do you have any further comments for us, sir?
No, I mean, I'll stand by for questions, or if people have anything specific of me and enforcement, or what I think I understand as the procedures.
Can I ask you one quick question? What would you say, or do you get significant contact from business owners or building owners on violators?
I'll say it goes in streaks, and usually what it is a dispute usually that happens, and that's when we get called because two businesses are not being good neighbors, I guess, and so we get called. So it goes in streaks, and usually it's very business specific. Yeah.
Is it usually a complaint of a business's employees occupying what should be customer parking, or is it customers parking there too long?
No. We have not had any complaints of customers parking there too long until this recent ordinance request. Most of it's been employees or business owners not being customers that are parking in spots.
Thank you. So with all our wonderful participants today, can we ask anyone to step up to the microphone if they have some commentary today? Love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, my name is Paul Slesser. The issue that we have is there are all-day parking spots across the street from us in different spots, but it seems like there are a lot of employees and business owners that park right in front of their own business or in front of other people's businesses, are there all day. And I'm wondering if there's some way to enforce the fact, you've got a business owner parking in front of his own business, really doesn't respect his customers. But I think the large problem also is all-day parking in 2-hour zones or customer parking. So,
Thank you. Anybody else like to give us their thoughts?
Hi, I'm Vicki Bressler. I own Merle Norman Cosmetics. When I first came downtown 3 years ago, it was, I always had a parking spot in front of my store, or pretty close. But we were getting tons of complaints because there's no place to park. Now, I realize people are also lazy and they don't want to walk a distance. But when we're getting more and more businesses downtown, and with more and more businesses, another one just opened Saturday. I think they had a great turnout because there wasn't a parking spot Saturday on the street. But we need a place for our customers to go. I myself am getting lots of complaints and said, I drove around 3 times, I couldn't find a parking spot, so I went home. I think we have a little bit of a concern, and one of my questions is, why can't the private parking lot that's owned by the city and by permit, why can't that open up so anybody can park there, so our customers can park there? Because we're growing like leaps and bounds downtown.
Can you identify what lot you're talking about?
It's over by the post office, and there's a parking lot there, and you have to get a permit each month to park there. But we're getting a lot more businesses downtown, and people have to have a place to park.
I will comment that the last several months, we've probably lost at least 10 to 12 parking spots with all of the restoration of the theater.
Oh, you've got more than that.
And and that's been a daily occurrence. I've never had an open parking spot in front of my business for months now. And what are you going to do? I want to be a good neighbor as well, because the addition of the restoration of the theater is going to be an awesome thing. So it will end. But that's taken anywhere right from 10 to 15 spots easily.
You got to go to the mic if you're going to comment, please.
There's some days that we have almost 25 trucks on the street. And so it has been a problem, but I think it's not all that. I think it's people parking where they're not supposed to. I unload my stuff, and I go and park someplace else. And I think we just need to address that. We want to grow. We want West Bend to be very successful downtown, and we want to grow, but we also need the parking for the customers.
Good morning, Kevin Schultz, Mountain Outfitters. I've been in business 26 years now, and 26 years ago we were at meetings like this talking about parking, and I'm sure in another 20 years we'll be talking about parking as well. There really isn't a parking problem downtown. It's a common sense and a laziness problem that we have, and it's business owners, it's employees, it's business owners not enforcing their employees basically to park in the correct spots. Now, prior conversations with the chief, they do have an enforcement problem. Obviously, the parking situation that we have in place right now is not working. When I started in business, we had 2-hour parking. Customers would pull up, they'd roll their car forward, their tires would get chalked. That didn't work. Obviously, we have the customer first parking now. That is not working. It's not being enforced. We need to re-examine this and come up with a plan that works. But it has to start with the business and property owners enforcing their employees and themselves basically not to park in front of their business. That's the only problem that exists down there. So again, please, as the bid, take a look at it. Don't make any quick decisions, but put a plan in place that the police can enforce, and that's going to work.
Kevin, wait, do you have any suggestions on that? Because I completely agree with you, because we all know business owners, building owners, we know exactly who the perpetrators are, but we don't say anything.
I could call 10 times a day, but I want to be a good neighbor like you
Right.
talk about. It's like,
Right.
it would be a war downtown if we called all the time.
Yeah.
I can throw names out if you want to, but I'm not going to.
No, me neither,
Okay?
because it
But-
seems petty, but you're right.
Absolutely.
So how do you enforce that?
Right, so I would propose, and again, my quick thought is go back to the 2-hour parking. You know, that way then police can come through, they can chalk the tires, and basically away they go, you know, I mean, that's.
So with all of the salons downtown, I can tell you, it takes longer than 2 hours to get this looking good, okay? So, I mean, what are you going to punish me because I'm getting my hair done? So what do you do?
Good question. Or restaurants. Again, you
Right,
know, am I sitting in a
restaurants.
bar or restaurant for more than 2 hours? That,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not sure. I don't know the answer there. But, you know, the problem is clearly, without a doubt, employees and business owners parking in the spots downtown. That's it. Okay? So however you can come up with a plan basically to eliminate that. And again, it should be as easy as common sense, right? Mm-hmm. We're business owners. Why would we take up spots where our customers who put food on our table, basically, why would we park there? It's the most ridiculous thing that I see. It's just common sense to me. So again, to me, it's an easy fix, but how do you do it where there's legal, you know, ramifications, you know, that you can basically hold people accountable? That's what you got to come up with. So, and I don't have an answer for that. You know, again, I don't know if the chief has or other communities that, you know, you've looked at to kind of, I'm sure we're not the only community where there's parking problems, right? I'm sure it happens everywhere, but how do you fix common sense, you know? So.
I'd be willing to go out on a limb. We're probably the only community that has such a lax parking enforcement policy, or not enforcement, but policy. We've been talking about this. It comes up once every year and a half, 2 years, and we have a meeting like this. And I'm going to go back to 4 or 5 years ago. We sat here, and it was a drawn-out conversation. And I think we were about this close to making some type of change. And I'm going to echo what Kevin said is there needs to be a change, right? What currently is in place is not working and has not worked for a number of years. And I will also echo what I'm hearing is it is business owners and employees parking. We all see the same cars parking in the same general vicinity day in and day out. And parking is our number one asset as a business owner down here. And there are people who do not respect that and do not respect the other businesses that are down here. Because parking on Main Street or allowing your employees to park on Main Street is a complete disrespect to every other business down here, because that one spot is forcing the next business's customer to park that much further. And even the other day I saw a business owner right near me park right in front of my restaurant. And I didn't say anything, but I just thought, oh man, but I don't see what the problem with 2-hour parking is. I was for it back then, and I still think that it is a positive change for the better.
Brian, I would say that to me, 2-hour parking is penalizing our customers for being downtown. It's saying we only want you here for 2 hours. If the issue is with the business and the building owners or the employees, those are the ones that we have to get to. We can't tell our customers we don't want you down here more than 2 hours. Because if I'm gonna go to lunch at Tappan Tavern and then I'm gonna stop over by Jeannie at Savoring Time, or I'm gonna go and to West Bend Mercantile, it may be more than 2 hours, and I don't want to have to worry about going to move my car. I'm just gonna go.
And I'll make the same suggestion then that I made 4 years ago in the same spot was then let's look at 3-hour parking. Okay. So, I mean, it's got to be some type of change that is going to elicit any type of change, right? Something's got to change.
So it looks like we've got somebody else to contribute.
Hi, I'm Krista with West Bend Pilot. I agree with you as far as 2 or even 3-hour limits. If someone wants to go out to lunch and shopping, it could be a 4-hour trip, hair, something like that. What if the businesses downtown were required to register the employee vehicles with their plates and make and model of the car, and they have that, and then if something like that, if that car is parked there more than 2 hours, then you'd be able to call the police to enforce something like that.
I believe that already exists. Chief, that is accurate. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is now.
Sure, that is what the intent was. I will tell you, and I'll just go through that. Employees didn't register their cars, and unless, and there was a mechanism that we could give them then, instead of a parking, a city citation for not registering their cars. But it became a game, because Brian would register his car, but then he would drive a different car to work. And he said, well, I registered my one car. Oh, and then they played games with their shopping permits. And so people didn't understand that. They said, well, I work downtown, but I went out to lunch, so technically I'm a customer, so I get to park there. And we listened to that over and over. And that's when I told you, it's basically, and it also was set up that downtown association was supposed to gather that information and bring it to us, and they didn't do it. So that's when I said it became pretty much unenforceable. So I go back to what Kevin and Brian have said. It seems to be common sense and in courtesy and everything else. But, and I understand you're not wanting to get into the neighbor disputes, because when you asked before, Tony, about who calls, it usually is that type of dispute, and then it causes other problems. I get that, but I don't know how else we enforce it unless we get a complaint.
Appreciate that. I have some really strong thoughts on this, so I've been listening. Anyone else want to participate, please do, but I'm going to share my situation, because I think I'm a poster child for this conversation. I acquired my building back in 2014. It's 3 stories, 22,000 square feet. I have at least 50 people in my building that are employed, and there's traffic every day between 3 to 4 businesses, and at seasonal periods, at tax season, and everything else. It's incredible. I have basically 4 spots in front of this building that has that many people. The first thing I recognized when I came downtown to acquire that property, parking was going to be an issue, and I certainly respected with all our employees that they cannot occupy spaces when I want my customers to have access. So the first thing I did was purchase almost $5,000 worth of parking permits every year from the city for the Walnut Street lot. So my employees know if they park on the street, they're fired. It's that simple. Next, people who park in those 4 spots, I can identify. I'm a car guy, so I can notice. I can identify those people. And what I heard some people say, including yourself, Brian, is that you wanted to say something. I think that was the missed opportunity, because I say something. Everybody knows me. I'm not shy. I'm trying to protect parking for my customers. I have a lot of senior clients. I just developed a flyer. When I see somebody violate that, I put it on their windshield. The last thing I want to do is impose on the police department for enforcement of parking tickets. It just seems like a waste of their time, and there's bigger challenges in the world. So the neighborly thing, I'm over that, because at the end of the day, if you're polite and address it with your neighbor and say, hey, just so you know, I've noticed you've been parking here. There is an ordinance. Nobody's ever been a problem. One person repeated twice. I talked to them again, and they said they apologized, they didn't know. So with just polite commentary, people have recognized, yeah, that's true, because most people are lazy. So ultimately, I think it just takes communication. I think enforcement should fall on the business owner to say something to those violators, or the building owner, because for some reason in my little area of downtown, it works. I don't have any problems with parking. I still don't have enough spaces. That's another issue. That's my problem. So it's very important for me to enforce that, and I do it diligently. And I just would like to continue that environment, and people should speak up, of course, politely. You want to be cordial with your neighbors. Some of my neighbors, the owner said, thank you for saying something to my employees, because they don't even listen to me. So I've become kind of the Gestapo of my corner, and people know, don't park there, man, because he's going to yell at you. And I don't yell, it just really to say to them, think about what you're doing. So communication makes sense, and it works for me. Don't want to burden the police department whatsoever. That's my thoughts. Somebody else was going to step up.
Yes. We're right next to you, Tony.
Oh, there you are.
Actually, I appreciate it when you call me and you say, would you please say something to your employees? We have a lot of employees. We don't have customers that come to our office, so I don't know what their mentality is. I've tried talking to them. I've talked to them one-on-one. I've shown a good example by not parking there, and yet People do. So I'm open to ideas on how to address the employees. I do not want to fire anyone because they are parking in front of our building. I think it is common sense, and I think it is laziness. Those are all the arguments I've used, and yet I hear from the employees it's not lazy, but I don't get an answer from them on what it is. So I'm open to ideas on how to address our employees, and if, Tony, you want to, that would be great.
Love to. It's that Sicilian heritage just gets the point across, so.
Yes, yes.
It's worked well.
Tony, just a thought. Pardon my ignorance on this, but we do traffic studies all the time. Is there any such thing as a parking study? There may be professionals out there that deal with this kind of stuff all the time that have answers that we're not thinking about.
We've done them numerous times, Justice,
Have you? Okay.
and it's the same answer comes back. It's exactly this. It's not a customer problem.
Okay,
or a
gotcha.
parking problem. It's a building business problem.
Sure.
I would also like to, when we last did this, we were asked to, and we did it as a police department, we went and we counted spots, and I'll just say this, in addition to what has been mentioned, there were spots, there was never a time when downtown was, quote, parked up, I shouldn't say never, when there's special events, but on a daily basis, there was spots available, but they weren't right in front of businesses, and that's another, and I don't know how you handle that issue, but when people have to walk a block, they think that they have to walk too far as a customer. I think Tappan Tavern has good enough food that I'll walk a block for it, but some people don't look at that, and so I don't know how you get that out to people, but that's the other issue downtown is there are spots available, people aren't utilizing them.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne Gugg from HTG Jewelers, and I just had a few thoughts while I was sitting there. Like you say, this keeps coming up year after year. We're moving into a higher technology society. Is there some way we can use that to benefit the parking situation? Maybe it's just social media where we set up a page where we can report with a picture someone who's parking there all day who shouldn't be. Let's shame them out of sitting there. We're all guilty of it, and we are looking for places to park. One other thought I had is the best place to park that is not used very much is Veterans Avenue for employees and business owners, because you can just pop over the bridge and you're right downtown. However, it would be nice if it was plowed a little bit better, because I notice everyone parking there is parking on a slant right now because of otherwise you're too far out into the street. So those are just a couple thoughts that I had.
Mike Scott.
Mike, do you have something to say from your location?
Yeah, first off, I appreciate everybody's comments, and I'm just as much to blame as the rest of them for parking on the street. And the last year has been really, really difficult. I know for a lot of us, I've been kind of getting a double dose because they're in the back of my building, plus they're in the front. But I also believe we need to get this back on task as far as we were asked by the council to address the proposed ordinance. And I would like to make a proposal that we tell the council that we'd like to table their ordinance and then take this to the transportation committee that the bid has established and add a few people to it and really let that group look at the entire parking situation and come up with a proposal for the bid. And my proposal for the committee would be Tony. The current committee right now is Tony, Larry, myself, and I'd like to add Justice and Mark Allen, who's the alderman for the downtown, and then Chief Moyler to that group. And we sit down and really look at what are some of the options, what are the things that we can do to try to improve it, and then come back to the bid with a proposal from that group. I think otherwise we could sit here today for 10 hours and we're never going to come to a solution.
I agree with you, Mike. Great idea. Any other thoughts from the board?
I would like to add to that I don't agree with putting time limits on people parking down there. I myself have spent better part of a day down there. I don't park down there. I park off 6th by my business, but Diva Events, I go in every single business down there, and then I go to dinner, and it is more than 3 hours that I'm down there. So I think to penalize any of your customers, I think is a real bad idea.
Yeah, I have clients that easily can be in my office for greater than 3 hours. So that would not be a good thing. Justice, would you be willing to be on that committee?
Sure. Yep.
Brian, you had mentioned that West Bend is one of, it's probably one of the only communities that doesn't like have some sort of law or whatever. Do you know what other communities are doing, like Grafton or Cedarburg or Port Washington? I don't currently know what their procedures are. Just so we'd have something to compare it with.
Yeah, I think Chief might be able to speak to this better, but I'd be willing to go out on a limb and say 2-hour parking is pretty standard in a lot of communities in the downtown district.
Question is, do they enforce it? Because it probably doesn't work. I think that's what Mike is proposing here, is a committee to dive deeper into it and come up with a better solution. Again, I think these are all great input today, but to make a decision without some deeper analysis, and I think makes no sense to me. So I think we should dive deeper and come back with a solid recommendation and get public input on those recommendations. Anyone opposed to that? Everyone else okay to be on that committee that Mike named? Other one, I think our alderman is not here, or Chief would be okay to be on that committee? I think we'll move forward with that. Does anyone else from the public that showed up today want to give us their thoughts?
My name is Jeff Luttrell. I own
Mike, 1 second. Somebody from the audience is going to speak.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
I'll just take my name is Jeff Luttrell. I own 2 buildings downtown. I'm not a business owner. I'm a building owner. I'm fairly new to the parking issue, so maybe this is a topic that's been discussed in the past. But one of the things I've noticed is that at the risk of offending the postal employees, they park on 6th Avenue all day long, which is close enough to downtown that I think those could be viable parking spots for business customers. Has there been some discussion in the past about having or requiring postal employees to park elsewhere? I know that they take up almost the whole west side, or the postal side of 6th Avenue, which is a significant number of spots. And then the other topic or issue that I might bring up is in front of the movie theater and the Centrum building, there's a roundabout. What is the purpose of that roundabout, and could it be converted into parking stalls? Maybe there's a valid reason for it, I'm just not aware of it. Thank you.
So Adam, I can address the postal workers. Originally, when the current ordinance that was put into effect, all of 6th Avenue was Tier 1, and the post office came to, and this is why, just kind of back up, Willis, why I'm not in favor of this 30-minute ordinance that's being proposed, because we're doing things for one business or a couple businesses, and it just gets out of hand. The post office and the West Bend News went to the city and asked to have the ordinance changed so that they wouldn't have to pay for parking permits in the parking lot. And they changed the ordinance to allow them to park on the east side or the west side of 6th Avenue and turn that into Tier 2. So it became their own little private parking lot because they get there very early. And I think that's something that this group that I'm proposing, those are all things that need to be looked at and addressed. And then we come back with a plan that works hopefully better than what we currently have. And it's also identifying maybe some other places where we can park. And somebody suggested Veterans Avenue. I totally agree, and I also think that, and I've been pushing hard, and Adam will, and if Jay's in the room, he'll confirm it, I firmly believe we need a third bridge. The easier access we can get to these parking locations, the better it's going to be for everybody. So I still go back to, let's put this committee together. We need to give a recommendation back to council, so the bid board needs to have a formal vote, in my opinion, to say that we'd like to have them table it and tell them that we're going to work on it and come back, maybe in 2 or 3 months with an answer.
Mike, would you formalize that, I guess, from your words and emotion, please?
Can I just say so moved?
We make a motion that the council table the decision on the ordinance, whatever number it is, I don't have it in front of me, and allow the bid to better study the parking situation downtown with the formulation of this committee.
Justice, sorry, do you want to?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, excellent. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Actually, we should discuss any agenda for the next meeting. We obviously have that as one agenda. We also talked about the trash bags for pets. Anyone want to add anything else to the agenda? So we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you again, public, for showing up today. Please feel free to come to every meeting that we have. So, great to get your input.